You're listening to All Things 3D, where we talk about the world of fabricating, designing, and capturing in the third dimension.
Good afternoon, everybody. Hi, this is Mike Bolger from All Things 3D, and this is 3D in Review for 1/1/2019. Yes, brand new year, and some of you are probably wondering if I fell off the earth and was never going to come back. Sadly, I am back. No, just kidding. So clearly a good time to start because CES is about to wrap up, and there have been plenty of great things. You just saw a little video from nreal, which I think is, I don't think a lot of people saw that on the radar. It is the product that many people are talking about now. And in my opinion, I think it's the one that for about $1,000 will beat the pants off of Magic Leap. And I've been very critical about Magic Leap. And one of the reasons, obviously, is its price, but what it was expecting the rest of the world to believe. And I've got lots of dog hair, so I apologize for that. I've got those two little furry animals, my little cliques, and they shed just like the big huskies. Oh well, back to the point. The other thing that we've got going on today, and I'll just show a little clip because later on in the week I will actually have the interview. But I had a great opportunity to not only explore a high fidelities VR experience with an actual Egyptologist within the Nefertari, and I learned something new the other day. But as you can see, a very interesting experience from that one static image, and the interview, which I'll show some clips a little bit later, was also pretty fantastic because frankly it kind of provided some real interaction between myself in the VR world and the individual that I was doing the interview, which is Ryan. And both of us were just VR characters. So I think they've kind of nailed it. Clearly it's going to get better, but we'll talk more about that a little bit later. So the other news that's in is, while we have somebody like nreal and clearly some other companies who are making progress in augmented reality, mixed reality, and VR, sadly, there are companies that have shuttered, and this is one of them. You may have heard of them, Meta. Very interesting company. They kind of started from the early on with their product, and I guess they've had some issues. What's notable, if you see next to me here, my friend John is wearing what's he wearing? Oh yeah, the Dreamworld DreamGlass. And if you guys have remember, the DreamGlass was designed and produced by one of the ex-employees, engineers, and there was a legal battle on that. Now, I'll be able to talk more about it and my feedback on it. And then above that is my prototype of the Occipital structure core. And I've talked about it before, shown some video out on YouTube on how I'm using that in conjunction with the DreamGlass to provide 6 degrees of freedom. Now, in saying all that, now that we've had all this attention with the nreal device, yeah, I feel a little bit disappointed, but I do have some interesting news, or I think insight, on what makes the nreal special. So tune in towards the end when I'll talk about more about the nreal. So again, Next Reality has a good, let me get my mouse over here, on a Next Reality article that talks about it. It's probably one of the better ones. Road to VR has written up to it, but they refer back to this one. So this is the one to read. If you're not familiar, Meta still has a website, and as you'll see in the article, a lot of it's gone. You can't order it anymore. And then obviously they have the CEO as the only individual actually wearing it. So it's sad. They were a large group. As you can see, they won the Augie Awards in 2017, which I guess is pretty striking. I guess they also did a few other things at AWE in 2018, and sadly, they're now gone. However, obviously, there are a lot of creative and you want to call it experts that are coming out of this, so we'll probably see splinter technologies from the people that were involved with this. So the other item that I thought was also disheartening, because in 2015 when I went to CES, I actually bumped into him on my way out of one of the venues there, and that is the company, what do they call themselves? ODG, and they created a pair of glasses with a full Android system inside that allowed you to project information on it. And as the article indicates, they put a lot of money in this, $250 million in Series A valuation, and it appears they're now going out. And again, they were trying to use an 835 chip. So my point in all this, and then I'm going to bring up this one other one. Anybody remember Game Face Labs? Well, I've talked about them. If you're not aware of them, somehow I got a feeling they're probably going to go out. But what's notable, as you can see behind it, they created a headset that works on the Jetson TX2. Now, as you can see, it's extremely bulky, and maybe this is one of the reasons why many developers didn't jump onto this. They supposedly have a developer's kit, but it's still pre-order. So clearly, over 8 months later, it's still pre-order. I think that's a point of concern. And so we'll have to see where this goes. But it looks like we've got 3 augmented virtual reality companies that are probably on their way out. Now, what is my opinion about this? As I've said, and I've been very critical about Magic Leap. Magic Leap, in my opinion, has a huge issue, and it's that it overpromised and obviously created a mediocre product that a Chinese company, or they're from Taiwan, has jumped in with this other product that's going to be 1/3 or at least half the cost of it, including a CPU unit. And sadly, I think that's where the Dreamworld will be overpriced. You could buy the DreamGlass for about $399 as a developer kit, but supposedly it has gone back up. I haven't checked their website, bringing I think closer to $600. Yet it does not include a computer, nor does it have 3 degrees of freedom. You could buy the Nova outside-in tracking system or work with something I have, but sadly, to combine that all together, there's no way to get near $1,000. So it really looks like nreal has kind of hit a sweet spot. A lot of people are talking about it. And sadly, what I'm going to be talking about today might be just wasted air. Okay, so let's jump back into some of the good items. As I mentioned, we talked about CES, so let me jump back. Oh, this is kind of a fun item. Since we're going to stay on the display or the visualization perspective, you may have experimented with 3D TVs. As you know, they've kind of gone the wayside, but now it appears we have in a company called Domenco, they cracked a code, I don't know about that, but glass is free. Essentially, they're using, let's see if I can remember the term here. I knew I was going to forget. I hate that when it happens. Well, essentially, man, I wish they would have brought it up in here. So they use a special type of glass and cameras in the system itself, as you can see the image here, to basically track your head and eye movement. And what that does is that they use, lenticular lens system that creates facets that can only be seen from a particular angle. You may have seen postcards and that. If you tilt them one way, you see one image, tilt them another, you show another image. So they essentially are doing that here, and I'm pretty sure that's the way the original Amazon, remember the 3D Amazon screen, worked. By controlling what your head does, that takes the place of physically having to move the screen. And they had a little demo there. But again, it's not clear, other than if it's an 8K LCD panel and you have the lenticular, it drops it down to 4K. So clearly the higher the resolution of the monitor, which adds to the cost, is what's going to give you about half of the resolution. There's a little video here that I'll play briefly so you can see, and clearly it's not in 2D or 3D, but it shows you how this object, by using another company's ability to track a hand movement, can draw, and it makes it look like it's 3D, again, without glasses. But some people think with the VR that's going on right now, do we need anything like this? But yes, I think some designers would like to have a screen that things jump out, allow them to track. There was another company at CES that had basically glasses that you wear, very thin ones. They're the shuttered glasses, and then you have a LCD screen that's polarized, and then it just flashes back and forth, or has two different polarization. I can't remember which, but there is tracking elements on the glasses and little cameras on the sides of your monitor. And so as you move your head, the object appears to be floating in space. And then they have a little pin that you can use as a stylus. It's been around a little while, and I don't know if it's worth it in the long run. But obviously, there are other things besides VR, AR, and mixed reality out there. All right, let's move on to the next item. Let's get in the architectural design. And I thought this was really nice. And we've been talking about using 3D fabrication for homes for some time. But what's notable, some of these are obviously quite cute and really good looking. But the important thing is, and you can read the article, I'm just going to go through a summary. This is, I thought, very interesting. This one here would cost about $4,000. Now imagine if you could essentially create these type of housing in these small areas at this kind of cost, not only for the homeless, but people who are barely making it. I know, at least in Portland, some of these homes or rental places have gone about twice what they used to cost about 10 years ago. If you live in the San Francisco area, you know immediately what I'm talking about. Pricing is horridly expensive. I think that's one of the reasons why you're seeing this trend with the micro homes. But using 3D fabrication really pushes the price down, as mentioned, at $4,000. It's interesting that we're finding a lot of this 3D fabrication in Austin, Texas. But it's there. Read the article. It's kind of cool. Now, the next one, I'm going to have to provide a precautionary note. It is of more, I would say it's of sexual nature, but it talks about a sexual object. And I'm only going to kind of hang up here, but there was a company, I guess it's Ose Blended Orgasmic Machine. You take that what you want, and you can go out the Engadget article. But the notable thing with this is the designer is a woman with a PhD in, I guess, 3D design, mechanical design, and she's developed a tool for women, and by using rapid prototyping and iterations in order to create a product that, based upon a study, that's more adaptable. So, I mean, you can read the details on it, and again, the important thing is, and I like the fact that it's a woman who actually wrote the article, but I think it's very important to see that not only are we seeing a great deal in the medical community, but we're seeing how 3D fabrication, 3D design is helping us and enhancing our capabilities in others. Some think that it's going in a wrong direction. I guess I'm not one of them. So again, take a look at it. It'll be in the show notes in this episode, and just click on it and read it for yourself. But that's about as far as I'll go with it. The other thing, going directly into 3D in medicine, I thought this was really interesting. And again, those for the squeamish, this woman donated her body to science when she died. And National Geographic has done this great story, not only talking about the technical process of doing what they call microslicing, where literally they take a cadaver and slice it in very thin. In fact, in this case, it's 27,000 samples that they slice and then take images of, and then they reconstruct it, very much like CT or MRI scans, but this is with actual, and they call it virtual cadavers. And this is great because not only do they talk about the process, and again, if you're squeamish, you might want to turn away, but they talk about the entire process. And you see here, now this is not a mock-up. This is the cadaver itself in obviously a smaller form. But they talk about the human component of it, her name, the reason she did this, and the number of years that she actually survived. But more importantly, she was an elderly woman. I think she lived into her 80s, and all the ailments that come along with age. I think she had one of her hips replaced, hips replaced, that actually creates some problems in the slicing process that you can read later on. But truly, not only a humanizing story, but the technical detail and the work that goes in to create this. And as she mentioned, she wanted to donate so that people could learn even in her death. And I think that's very important. One of the reasons I'm personally a donor, because of the same thing. And if we can help even after we die, I think that's very important. So great article. Take some time to read it. Okay, let's move on to 3D scanning. And this is nothing really new, but what's important, if you own an iPhone 10 or the newer iterations, as you know, there is a depth sensor that's used to basically detect your face and use it for security reasons. But with the new SDK that has come out, you can actually use it as a capture tool. Now, the little video here that I'll show shows what you're seeing in the screen. Now, keep in mind, you've got to point the front end of that there, so I don't know how he's showing the screen. But as you can see, he's rotating it, and I guess the article kind of indicates that this image here was basically an object rotating in his hand, and then you can send it off. It's, I wouldn't say crude, but it's not the best. Photogrammetry can actually do a much better if you want to use a phone, but it's quick and fuses the information very good. If you've ever used a structure sensor, then clearly you know what I'm talking about. And so you might want to take a look at it there. Here they're showing the different processes in the 3D scan. But most importantly, if you own an iPhone 10, it's a free scanning tool, and you can immediately put it to work and yeah, try it out. And like I said, you can save it. You can save it in different formats. Knowing the libraries that the new Scene Kit and their input-output functionality does a lot of that inside. Now, clearly, some of these scans I don't think we're taking with their device. As you can see, the mesh is very smooth, which I think is more from photogrammetry, so it's a little misleading. But if you're familiar with the structure sensor or any of these depth sensing using the Connect type scanner, I think you're going to get similar results. But keep in mind, the camera that the iPhone 10, the depth is good for about 5 inches from your face, maybe a little bit more. So clearly you're not going to get the scanning capability with the structure sensor or Connect or some of the other more expensive components. So if you just want to play with it, might be a good thing. I thought it was kind of funny that if you go out to the app here, that the reviews all were great, and then captures everything. Clearly seems more marketing than actual reviews, but that's my take on it. All right, let's move on to the next item. Yes, the other big news is HTC Vive has announced another headset called the Vive Cosmos, and we'll talk about a little bit what, you know, I've actually added a lot of comments in Road to VR as well as Upload, and I obviously have some feedback. One of the things that's notable is it's not a mobile unit like the Oculus Quest. It is a cabled unit, and either to a desktop, or they show in their little video, which I'm going to show here in a moment. If I can find it, where are you? No, so I'll go ahead and play it. Well, as you can see, kind of vapid in its explanation. I do think it is probably a production mock-up. I don't think it was functional. Nobody that I know of actually tested it out. And in fact, it kind of cause some projection on another device that we'll talk about in a second. But essentially, other than the video and some very vague capabilities, a lot of people are speculating. My speculations, one, it looks very much like a Windows Media Windows mixed reality type headset. The band at least does. The headphone, a lot like the Samsung Odyssey. Now, what interesting is that this thing also includes 4 cameras, 2 on the front, 2 on the rear. Now, in my own designs using the Oculus Core, they have a 160-degree black and white camera. And if you notice the way that this is set up here, this I think is about 120, maybe 130 degrees, clearly enough to provide a broad range. And as you know, with the Windows Mixed Reality, if you put a controller behind your head, you lose sight of it, and then it doesn't come back and just kind of hangs in air until you bring it back and gets tracked again. Now, I don't play a lot of these type of games. A lot of people do find that frustrating. We'll see if the Cosmos has the capability of tracking it, but those people who've tried out the Oculus Quest, which also is a 4-camera system, find that it works really well. And Road to VR is also one of the companies that spends some time with it. And other interesting point is, if you notice the controllers that they had shown off too, they have white bands. Clearly, not clearly, but I'm assuming because of that, that it's a visible light camera system, more than likely black and white, to keep the cost down, and using a similar constellation, or in this case just a pattern, to provide geometric changes so that it can track it in space. I'm assuming there's also IMUs in there as well to create the SLAM information. Now, where I'm speculating, even though there's no processor, obviously there are screens. Some people think, and I'll get to it in a moment, that they're going to be fairly high resolution. I guess 2K by 2K is what somebody's speculating for each eye, which would be very cool, especially for watching movies. But the other thing is, if it's based on, and I guess I'll release that, the Qualcomm reference design, Qualcomm has been known in the last 2 iterations to have a hybrid chip, not a hybrid, that does a lot of the fusion work. Unlike the Windows Mixed Reality system, that essentially takes those raw black and white streams and throws them to the computer to process, they may be taken care of here. And if they do that, that's a good point. One, it allows them to do most of the graphic processing on a, let's say, a Snapdragon to provide decent graphics, as well as on a desktop. And more importantly, and they didn't show it there, you could make a wireless unit. One of the reasons why you're not seeing wireless units for the Windows Mixed Reality system is because of the bandwidth required that has to be sent wirelessly, as well as the HDMI information, because the USB 3 are required in order to push the 2 streams of the black and white cameras. And now they may multiplex them to reduce that. But again, it's a lot of bandwidth. And if they do all the fusing in here, and then you're only looking at, let's say, a cloud point, or even, let's say, plane detection, clearly that would be much better and less bandwidth required in order to send that back to the host device. So that's my speculation. You know, some people from this show that it's a Fresnel lens. Here's some more images of it. And again, I looked at the top and bottom of these, and there are no other cameras. Some people, if you look at the video that we just went through, it showed emission from the top and bottom. I think it's heat, and the reason I say that, let's see if we have an image here. But let's go back to it in a second, and I'll just review it. So let's. There we go. So if you look at the bottom here, these are just vents. But more importantly, look at this slot right here, right at the top. If you zoom into this, you'll see that it actually looks like some type of heat sink. And I think this is great because what that allows, and let me jump back to this screen, is that there's a similar slot on top. So it allows basically thermal ventilation to come through, constantly keeping it reduced, and knowing that possibly these cameras could be sensitive. It allows stable tracking, which I think is a good thing. But that's my opinion. Again, until we get more information on it and somebody actually gets to try it out, we'll know more about it. Now, again, they didn't release any projection on when it will be available, or what the price will be. And knowing HTC Vive, as some other people have kind of pointed out, they have a tendency to create more expensive products. Remember, that was the case with the, what is it, their Vive, no, I can't even remember, I want to say Fusion, but that's not it. Their own mobile headset that's very similar to the Lenovo Mirage 1 and allows basically a lower end, I think it's a Snapdragon 835, to be able to provide 6 degrees of freedom. However, it does not have 6 degrees of freedom controllers, as will the Oculus Quest. But more importantly, it's about $600 to $800 if they ever release it in the country. And if you remember, they wanted to identify it as an enterprise product, and sadly, we've kind of moved past that, and I think Oculus is just going to squash this mobile market. But again, it is interesting that you'll be able to use USB-C and plug it into a computer or into a mobile device, but we'll have to see that mobile device. All right, moving on, here's an article from Upload that talks about it as well, and I'm wondering if some of the information that I pushed, but they talk about 4 cameras as well, 6 degrees of freedom, so you can read that. And then this came out from Road to VR, where they had an opportunity to look at this Acer. I don't remember if they identify the name, but clearly it was a Qualcomm reference design, and many people feel that this component here is the optics and screens that will be used in the Vive. Now I've already forgotten its name. But if it is the case that it's going to be used in the Vive Cosmos, then that will be a great thing, because from the people who have seen this, it was very sharp. They didn't like the Fresnel lenses again, and I'm pretty sure that there'll be Fresnel lenses in the Vive Cosmos as well. But I guess the screen is crisp. As some people said, there is no screen door effect, and could do well. Some people asked if, unlike their new Vive Pro, which now has eye tracking, will that be included? I don't believe that's the case. They didn't state it. And that's a neat feature too. If you're looking at the HTC Vive Pro, they will now offer eye tracking. And they're going to be working with NVIDIA so that we can actually start taking advantage of that to increase the resolution or use the raw resolution of the middle of the screen, and then obviously the areas you're not looking at has lower resolution, which can provide improved performance, especially on a lower machine. So that's kind of neat. Okay, so I think that's about it. I think there's some reports of some hands-on with the Pimax 5K Plus, which some people say is remarkably good. Not so much with the 8K version. Okay, I didn't. Yeah, I guess they're saying that it's 2160 by 2160, which obviously beats the Vive Pro or the Samsung Odyssey. So there you go. Kind of clunky, but again, it's a reference design. But I think this one is to highlight the graphics, or what do you want to call it, the computer unit. Again, this unit has one. The Cosmos will possibly have one. So I do think that is a better option. And obviously, if you've been watching this show, that is something that I have been working on for some time too. And I do believe this is the best route. And clearly, they seem to have a screen on this, which makes sense. And then there's also the option of just using a newer smartphone with an 845, or this year I think there's an 855 variant that will be available. So more power to them. We also had some comments about NVIDIA and all this, clearly from the card-wise with their, was it the 2080 now, 2070, 2060, they've obviously got some good cards, but they've kind of, I can't say they dropped the ball on the mobile. I think whatever contract they had as an OEM for Nintendo with their Switch unit, I think that may have been a smarter move. But clearly from a VR perspective, using the TX2, we really haven't seen anything. The only thing that was possibly going to come out was the game face. And as you know, Magic Leap, which again, I think is underwhelming, uses the TX2. and but I was hoping we'd see somebody else using it. And in my own experience, they kind of played the feel on it, and I felt a little betrayed by them. Okay, well, let's move on to something else. I don't think it was at CES. If they were, they were, but they came out with this prior to CES. That's right. You can now feel and smell your VR environment. So obviously all the snark that goes along with it, but I thought it was kind of cool. Let's see if I got a little video. I don't think I do. They may have one in here. But after reading it some more, I really think it's kind of neat, for different perspectives of VR. If you're creating realistic environments for people to relax, maybe having some relaxing sense would be important. But also they have, which really wasn't identified initially in their video. Let's see if we can get to their little video. I don't think they had a video. But here's the items. And obviously what it's going to be available to is basically on everything. Where was it? Because they had a little video. Yeah, sorry about that. Let's see if we can scroll down and find it. Well, darn. Sorry about that. I had a video. Well, the video showed a kind of a breakdown of all the components. And essentially it's a couple of fans, but it also has, what do you want to call it, electromagnetic vibrators. So it gives you some haptic response. And then there's some heaters built in, and I saw the 2 coils in the design. So they're trying to create all the effects that you would have outside of visual and the auditory capabilities. And that's what we're seeing here. Will come in 3 colors. No idea on price. Signed up as a developer. We'll see how soon that I'll get more information on it. But a lot of snark came out of when they released this, but depending on its weight, it could be very interesting. My point was, if you're just going to do aromatic elements, you could just have that sitting in the room and controlled through Bluetooth instead of having another attachment. I do think it's going to be fairly heavy on a device that's already fairly heavy on your head anyways. But haven't tried it. We'll see how it works. But kind of a neat device. All right, on to what I think is the crown of CES, and they probably will get many awards for it, is nreal. And I'll have one more little video to show you. So as you can see here, the glass is a little bulky, but much more conforming to the head than others. And they come in these great colors. And they do have a cable, but so does the Magic Leap. In fact, what's interesting is that this was designed by an image engineer who left Magic Leap. Don't know if he was disgruntled or not, and decided maybe he could do better, but this is what he came up with. Look at it. Fairly lightweight, sleek, with a cable, lightweight. And let's see what else we have here. And if you remember, I showed in the beginning, and I guess I'll go ahead and play it again. This is the video that so you can see there the images are pretty detailed, and that's because they're using 2 1920 by 1080 screens, one for each eye. And so people immediately thought that would be great for watching videos and movies, which I would have to agree with. But they also provided 6 degrees of tracking, and some people felt that the anchoring was really actually pretty good. Now here's the little processor unit. It's designed around an 845, so you're not going to get great performance out of it, but the 845 does pretty well. And if you've ever used an Oculus Go, which only has an 821, the performance, I think, is really good. So you're about double the performance. And then you have this little puck here, as they call it, the Oreo toast, that provides the 3 degrees of freedom so that you can interact with it. And then, you know, if you go out to YouTube, you'll find a lot of hands-on with it, and they all are very encouraged by it. So I'm going to bring up some images so that I can bring up what I speculate is what they're working on now, or how it's working. So here's a version of it in its carrier. So as you can see, there's a kind of a thickness to it from the lens itself. So we have a special, probably a, you know, and I've seen this in another design, it's probably some type of polarized lens system. But in here is probably the two, what do you call it, projection devices. And I'm going to bring up a picture and what I think those projection devices are. But before I head off here, let me show you another image of it so you can see. So here's this frame, and this is where I think the projector is, right inside here on both sides. And then let me jump back to, where's it at? Another website that talk about it, because obviously they've impressed the people. They've raised another 15 million, and most importantly, they plan to actually have this available for about $1,000, which clearly is a great price. And the cool thing is Magic Leap has had a huge investment. It's probably going to have the people who invested ask questions of Magic Leap. How can a company, obviously with far less money, make a much cooler product? And we've given you so much. And so that may push them to start moving a little quicker to come out with something. Now, the other thing that's important, and I'm going to identify this right now, is the big difference is, if you remember, the Magic uses LCOS projectors into hologram-based, what do you want to call it, refraction type devices, in order to give you two planes that you have a far distance and a near distance. I'm pretty sure that that is not the case with this. My bet is that they're using basically the same OLED panels that you can find in some of the Sony SLRs, cameras. These are 1080p, RGB, very bright, have a lot of lumens, and it would be perfect. In fact, if you go out to their page, which I will here, it shows you the different models, there's different variants, and if you look over here, full HD at 1920 by 1080 RGB. Mini LVDS is the format, the chip's built into it, so it's very easy to connect to, and then tells you the voltage required. I've actually ordered from another company to see if I can get some of these. Here it talks about the features of it, and I think there was a page, use cases, that kind of tells, oh, where's it at? There we go, of what this could be used for. As I said, I'm pretty sure that is this using a lot of EVS on consumer cameras and professional cameras, but here are some of the other areas that they can be used in. And my bet, this is the direction they went, either with a Sony or something similar. They projected into their special polarized, and maybe it doesn't even need to be polarized, just semi-mirrored. And because of their compact size, and let's jump back to what it looks like again, it projects directly into the semi-mirrored element here, and as you look out. And the important thing is it's probably curved in such a manner that it does provide some, I want to say application, but optical application, so that it magnifies it so that it looks proper, and very similar to some of these other devices like the one next to me that John is demonstrating, which is the Dreamworld DreamGlass, and kind of works on the same technique. In fact, I will get into it in a little bit of how this thing works. Okay, so that's about it for our news. And that's my speculation that they're using something like this little product here from Sony on each eye. Clearly, it's not going to provide what Magic Leap promotes, which is a far and near focus capability, but The fact is, many people feel because of the bright screen, and knowing from my own experience in the development of the systems I've been working on, I think it's more than adequate, and I think they've got a hot product there, especially if they're 6 degrees of freedom tracking system. Their inside-out system is stable. I don't know if they have hand tracking in it. Clearly, if they're going to provide a 3 degrees of freedom little puck, that is probably not the case. But for viewing a ton of things, I think they've done a great job. Also, if you go back and look at it, they built into the earpieces themselves probably some type of audio components so that you don't need earbuds. Unclear. There may be a ear jack on their little puck, and I guess I could go back and check and see if that's the case. I don't know if they're seeing it. Wouldn't make sense. You should build it right into the headset. But I did hear that there are audio components, audio drivers, so that you can get audio, which will be very cool. So there you go. I think that's the product award of CES for 2019, and I think this will be coming out in the third quarter. And if you're a developer, I think you should jump on it. I think it's going to be pretty cool. Appears, if I saw, they will have an SDK for both Unreal and Unity. So if you work with either of those platforms, you're going to be right in line for it. The other thing that's kind of important too, if they're just projected screens, other than the input information for the spatial tracking, it's going to be fairly easy to work with, and this could also work with the desktop. In fact, they alluded that it can work with a desktop. And someone mentioned that this particular device, let me jump back to that screen so you can see it, this little, what do they call it, the sandwich or the toast, can be replaced with the desktop. And one person asked the question, well, could you play VR games with it? And frankly, I don't see why you couldn't. You wouldn't have, I think it's only got like 6 degrees FOV, but you could get some limited, and you could put, you know, little caps in front of it if you wanted to block out the outside light for maybe watching a movie or something like that, or at least maybe something a little darker, maybe on an airplane or something. But yeah, I think this is an excellent little product. Okay, so let's go to my little work with a product called DreamGlass. And let me get back to my screen. Where are you, screen? There we go. All right, so here I've got my friend John, and actually it's just a foam bust that's been, I would say, I'm sprayed, painted flat black, but it's kind of like a velvet. And the reason I chose this is because if I lift up this, I'll have to take it off. I embedded a camera. I wanted to bring a camera in because I found using a smartphone, trying to capture what you see in here has been somewhat limited. So I decided, if I'm going to continue working with this, to build myself a little prototype. So it's basically a USB camera. I won't be able to show off everything today because I essentially have to run it through another device to look at it. But it does work, and it's kind of neat to record, and you can line it up pretty well. But here is the actual Dreamworld DreamGlass system. And if those people actually were at CES, you can go by their booth. But it's very, very similar to both the Meta that we talked about, that's no longer going to be with us. And also, as mentioned, one of the engineers from Meta is the one that designed this. But you have essentially a plastic protective frame, and then you have semi-mirrored lenses. Again, the semi-mirrored lenses. And then if you can look up in there, that's where the two LCD panels are. And they bounce, literally they're at an angle, and they bounce, obviously, light into the semi-mirrored and reflect them back into your eyes. What's interesting is that the resolution I thought was pretty good until the 1080p nreal has been released, but this is equivalent of about I think it's, I don't want to guess, was it 2560 by, it's about 1280 per screen by 1200, or no, I'm sorry, 1600, so it's even a little less than that. But the quality is really good. I've got a couple of videos up on YouTube if you want to take a look at it. Other than that, if you may have heard that it's kind of plasticky. Yes, it is. They use a kind of a metal band, I think that's metal, to hold the back end. It does have a ratchet type tightening system, but I felt that the support here, if you notice this, I've actually added this support here, at least for my head, I guess I got a flat forehead, didn't provide the amount of support. Also, there's not a lot that's actually supporting this. Since I had this at the OMSI showing it off and had it off and on, I think it's actually become loose. And so that might be a concern. And then the first unit I had some problems. It basically went out. So kudos to them. They immediately sent me one. And again, at the time that I bought this, it was $399. I think it has gone up to $600. So, you know, the other thing to keep in mind is that this does not have positional tracking. It does, however, have sensors for hand tracking, which work fairly well. So if you're familiar with the Leap Motion, you've kind of got that capability in it. And then there is a black and white camera, which I couldn't see. I essentially disabled it in Windows. And then you're probably wondering what this little component here is. Yes, that's the Occipital core. I've used it in other projects. But the nice thing about this is, and it's now available, and you can get a developer version for I think $400 to $500, and it'll be released in March for I think $300 if I remember correctly. It includes basically the depth. It's got two infrared cameras now, as well as a wide angle 160-degree black and white, and then the standard what do you call it, laser pattern that you find in the Kinect. So you have depth capability. And more importantly, they provide a library and a Unity kit, which we're going to get into a minute. Really easy to set up to get moving. And then they provide a USB-C. And make sure you get a USB-C cable specified for USB 3 rates. Otherwise, you'll find that you're going to get diminishing returns because it will only support it at USB 2. So make sure you get the right cable. Sad thing is most of those cables are this kind of claw, so they're a little bulky. So maybe someone will come out. But I found that it wasn't too bad. I used some little tie wraps to kind of put this all together to keep it bounded when I presented it at the show. This also has a proximity detector inside here, but I put a Band-Aid on it. And it's interesting because you couldn't just put tape because it must be reflecting a lighter material, and the Band-Aid was the only thing that worked. And I have a note. I sent them some feedback on it. I haven't heard anything back from them yet. But let me go ahead and put this on my head. So as you can see, I'll tighten up. Other than the cables, it fits well. It's not that heavy, even with the occipital structure core on it. And yeah, you have really good visibility. Again, like many of these glasses, including the Magic Leap, it does, I wouldn't say diffuse, it does decrease the amount of light on the outside, which would be obvious because you need to reflect it in. And since this is a reflected technique, like all the systems, you do have some level of ghosting, but I found on this one, as well as any other mirrored system with ample signal coming in, which this one does have LCD panels that are fairly brilliant. As long as you keep the content bright, you get decent occlusion. Now, some people said that the occlusion on the nreal system was really good as well. I'm not surprised, but more than likely the demos probably were set up in such a manner that they were bright to begin with. So you'd have to use a very dark scene, and as you know, by making the scene dark or black, that provides the transparency. So you don't really want to have a lot of your scene doing that. So as you can see, they kind of look like, what do you want to call it, safety glasses. So think of it in that perspective. And actually, if they were a little bit larger, like the Meta, just have a little bit more here, you could use them as safety glasses while having information be presented into them. So I think there's a good role there, and because there's fairly high resolution, you can actually read text. There are two demos in their SDK, one for a desktop that actually mirrors the Windows desktop. That was pretty cool. And then there was another one to showcase like science, anatomy, and so forth. And then I've created one for the OMSI, which was a Nefertiti bust in a glass case, and that people could walk around, which I personally thought was cool, but only because I had this tracking in it that allows you to get closer and further away from it. But again, the nreal will have all this built in, as well as a component to drive it. So hopefully they might offer this with just a headset, but I don't think that's the case. But at $1,000, again, if they can get it, let's say $999, I think they've got a winner. This, again, right now is $399, so it's pretty reasonable, but you still need to power it with a desktop, and you still need to find yourself some type of positional tracking. It's not all included. So from a developer's perspective, it's kind of a hodgepodge. Okay, so I'll take it off. And as mentioned, I do have this a demo out on the web, and I'll probably put a couple more out there as I continue to work with it. The Occipital structure core SDK now has anchoring built into it, as well as vertical and horizontal planes, just like AR Core and AR Kit. So it's pretty well made. So we're going to kind of jump right into it. Let me bring up my my little desktop here. So let's take a look at it. Okay. All right. So behind me, wake up my mouse. Yeah. I should have it up. Now this is from an earlier demo, so you'll have to. We're just going to stick with this. The DreamGlass SDK is basically a drag and drop. You replace the Unity camera with its SDK, and then there are a couple of features. For instance, what I thought was really great is instead of using their IMU, which is built into the Dreamworld, I was able to shut that off and replace it with the IMU in the structured core. So the fusion that takes place in the structured core is what's used, and it works great. In fact, I thought, well, maybe the distance here would be a little bit of an issue, so you might want to create a neck algorithm. But I found that it wasn't much different than the IMU built into the Dreamworld itself. In fact, I didn't notice any at all. So I didn't have an issue with it. Okay, so let's look at the screen behind me. So for you to set up the tracking in the structured core, you bring in they have like a service for Windows that you have to install first. And if you look down on my desktop, it's right here. And you have to launch that. And I'll go ahead and do so. And it's down here. And then you just, it's called the XR service. So once that is launched, then you just add in, you go out and you add in their tools. And I think it's not actually a package yet. So you have to do it. What I would do is just use their demo and then use that as a jumping point for the rest of it. So let me bring back the camera. So you bring in their XR Unity component, which is here, which is the XR session if you look on the side here. And you really don't have to do anything with this. Just leave it alone. And then go back to your camera, which is the most important thing. And your camera here, even though we just show the camera built into Unity, all I have to do is this GBCR, actually this is the camera from another headset I'm working on. All I have to do is go back to, where's it at? This, and you can see the GSVR. So if you're wondering what this is another headset that I replaced with an LCD screen and use their Unity SDK. So it's a mirrored thing, very similar to this, but it's bare bones, and I had to basically put my own LCD display in it. Worked pretty good. In fact, it had a little bit better resolution than this, but it would have been very piecemeal. So I was hoping to contain it all in one environment. So, but it works very similar. You bring in your camera, and then what you need to do is just make sure you go back, see to here, and where it says track transform, just put that camera in there. It's as simple as that. So you locate it, put the camera in there, then it knows what device is being tracked, and then you just place your camera. Now, like AR Core and AR Kit, you would probably place it at transform 0.000, as I have here. Actually, I have a little bit. But DreamGlass told me that that wasn't as essential, and some of their demos don't show it at that point. And I have to agree with it. So let's kind of go to my game. And this is what I see. Oops. There we go. And this is my Vincent little demo. He's drawing on or painting. there, but let's see if I can actually launch this without it crashing. It probably won't. We'll see. There you go. So as you can see here, it's projected as 2 stereo images. Notice the what do you want to call it? Distortion, because it's compensating for the distortions in the lenses in the GCVR mirrored glass. And I found that it worked pretty good until you move. It does a great job for, what do you want to call it, the vertical projection, but when you twist your head, it becomes a problem because it doesn't compensate for the rotation, so they need to work on their algorithm to compensate for that. But if you're just looking straight ahead, it works great. And again, with the structure sensor, it allows you to move forward and backwards. Again, I have a couple of demos on YouTube that you can take a look at for that and play with it. Now, I'm going to go ahead and install. Hopefully I don't crash it. I'm going to go out to import package. And if it goes out to what I was just in, which it didn't, where did I put it? Geez. Let's go out to my data drive, Unity demos, and there it is. Nope, wrong one. Now I forgot where I put it, and I knew I brought it up. Okay, let's see if we can drop it in. I still have a connection to that machine, I hope, or did it go to sleep? Great. That's what happens when you have too many machines. All right, so while it's trying to find it, I think it went to sleep. Let's see if I can find it over here. I dropped in the assets. Well, here we go. All right, I found it. So what you do is okay, fine. So you open it and let it decompress. And I'm just going to go ahead and bring in the whole thing. But not only does it provide you Windows plugin, but it also provides you an Android plugin. So if you have a beefier phone that's on their list, you can plug this in, just like we're finding with the nreal and the Cosmos, the ability to use this headset with an Android device. I'm just going to hit import, and it may or may not affect everything else, but we're not actually going to run a live demo, so we're just going to go through the process. So if you're familiar with Unity, down in my project, we'll have a new set of folders here shortly. And like many SDKs, there are prefabs made. So essentially you just drag the prefab in from their folder, and which has the camera. So we'll see if that's the case. Okay, so let's find, there it is. There's our Dreamworld. In fact, maybe we'll just, let's start with their, let's see, do they have an example? Yeah. Let's start with their, let's go with their scene. So let's look at their phone interaction. Let's do this one. All right, so here's a simple scene that they created. And here's your camera. So there's your camera and your camera rig, and then you just identify over here if you are using PC or Android and the type of devices. Notice the devices are somewhat limited. And then you go to features, and then here you can determine if you're tracking. Notice you could say IMU or the NOLO, so you could actually set this up to use the NOLO outside in tracking system, which we've talked about on this show. Not a big fan of it, but it's reasonably priced at $200. So if you needed tracking and you were stationary and on desktop, it would work great. But if you wanted to do inside out tracking, clearly it won't work. So since we're using the Oculus Structure Core, we're just going to hit none. and just basically use, and then the camera here, we can determine what camera we're actually going to be using. Okay, so just leave all that alone. And then for head rotation, basically, as you can see there, this is where our actual camera is set up, right here. So if we wanted to bring in the, so let's see, I'm going to go ahead and just copy this. And then I'm going to go back to the previous demo, if I can find it. Actually, I had a whole bunch of demos working here. So let me find it. Oh, that was good, Mike. Lost it. Oh, here we go. Let's try. No, that's the solar. Well, that didn't work. Let's try this one. Well, that's really good. Okay, well, clearly I've lost my previous plugin. So let's do this. All right. All right, sorry about that. Okay, so we should be able to paste it, and now we have a new camera in here. So as you can see, it's called Camera Rig. And if you notice, our GVC camera is just main camera. So what we want to do is change this, find the actual camera, which is right there. So what we're going to do, change that into our main camera. And then we're going to tell XR Unity that this is our new camera now. And then now what we'll need to do is to go ahead and just kind of close this off. That's not seen anymore. Okay, and then we have this plane here, which we don't need. Okay, so there we go. We should have everything set up. And then, as mentioned, we want to make sure in our camera itself, PC, no tracking, active camera is the RGB. And then we should be good to go. So if I hit play, okay, notice it goes into, means we got an error, so something. wasn't set correctly. But there's some instructions, and I will put a little more detail the next time. But clearly, a lot of it's very straightforward. And the only thing that I've, if we could go back to the original demo, what you want to do with the main camera is essentially what I have is the GVC camera I've turned off, but turn that off now. Essentially your XR Unity, you want to make sure you're pointing at the new camera rig, which is this, and then basically identify its platform. Keep in mind that the camera itself is further down, and essentially the renderers, as I showed here, is what allows this thing, and I wish, actually I'll bring up a demo and run it on the screen. So once everything is set up, and here's your actual camera here, it uses a plane that literally kind of creates a mirrored effect. So we can go and it will look like this. Let me bring up the little demo. I'll just run it. It can run. We'll go window. And we'll just stay window. So we'll let it play here. And this is the Nefertiti display that I created. Notice essentially the panels are projected because even though it looks like they're horizontal, the panels themselves are 90 degrees. And so when you actually view them, they're properly projected into the display itself, and they show up. And I find the results fairly impressive. The camera functionality on this little camera here kind of blows out some of the highlights, but it does look very good. And as people will find with the nreal, this particular headset also provides very good optics and quality. And I think it's well worth $399. However, you already have to have some type of computer to hook it up to, which most people have, and sadly, no included positional tracking. But for, what was it going to be, $300 in March, you'll be able to actually get this $300 or $400. You'll be able to buy this. So you could get a positional tracking system. Again, you'll have to provide your own PC or tracking unit. For instance, I'm making a Nook that has that capability so that you can, with a battery pack, be able to walk around with it. So I'd say for $400 plus $399, again, it may have gone up, that's $800. And then you'll have to include your PC. Again, the nreal for $1,000 will include a computer component as well. But for now, this is the cheapest or lowest cost system on the market. And if they keep it at $399, I think it's well worth it. And again, remember, this also has hand tracking, which is not available on the nreal. So you do have that capability too. So look, probably next week or the week after, I will have another demo that we'll go through. But this is essentially what you're seeing. And this is what you would see there, except they would be rotated 90 degrees opposite to one another so that they show up properly. And because I have nothing hooked up, you can't actually see it. But if I move the IMU, then you'll see the screens rotate. But that gives you a good idea. And as I said, both the Structure Core SDK is pretty well done. I do see some issues with it pushing a little bit more processing power than our consumption than it needs to. I think I had it running like 70%, so obviously they need to work on that. This doesn't really draw that much, but if you're not going to be using hand tracking or some of the other cameras, you might want to disable them in your what's it called? Your device manager. So you might want to disable them here. You can actually, I don't have them hooked up, but it adds a couple of cameras so you can shut them off, and that it will actually, I think, at least prevent them from heating up and adding heat. It does get a little warm. One other thing that I did notice with that to keep in mind, and again, I hope they fix it soon, is that the proximity sensor, when you take it off and put it back on, it only brings an image on one side, so you lose one of the images. I brought that to our attention. Hopefully that's a software issue. So as mentioned, I've taped it up so that it's always on for my task here. I don't believe that was the case when I first got it, so hopefully I don't have another hardware issue. But other than that, yeah, it works as advertised, but you might want to wait a few months and see what nreal will have in the market. But keep in mind, if nreal has a product, they say towards the end of the year or in third quarter, we'll see if that's actually the case. This product's available now, and it does function. And if you're looking at developing, I think it'd be best to kind of work with that. It's a lower cost version than buying the Magic Leap, at least in my book, and I get, in my opinion, better clarity, better image, and more important, FOV is wider. And actually, that's another good point. The FOV on this is wider than what they say the nreal. This is about 90, 95. So it literally is your full vision there. And the fact is that only half of those lenses shown in the nreal seem to be visible. I'm thinking that is a diagonal FOV, and it might be even narrower than that vertically. This, again, it's a better unit. Again, plasticky, but if you can get past that, you're not wasting your money on it. Or at least I don't think I did. Okay, well, I think that's it for today. I appreciate those who tuned in. Let me get the right mouse again. Apologize for that little delay. And I guess we'll be back in, what, about a week or two. All right. Enjoy the rest of your January. Bye.